Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Close to Broke. My name is Kieran. Today, as you guys can see, we're back at the Lucky Lady Casino. Let's go. As you guys have been noticing, we've been traveling a little bit, going to places that we've either never been or haven't been to in a while. And man, it's exciting to just do stuff outside of the normal thing. Breaking the habit also helped us a little bit out there by giving us a bit of an upswing. We're on a bit of a heater now, won 4 sessions in a row, and excited to make it even more. The game should be popping off, or at least getting going here, as today should be a fun day. We're going to be playing 5, 10, 20, probably 10, 20, 40 by the end of all of it. The swings are going to be massive, but let me tell you something. I'm feeling good about myself. I'm on a heater. We're going to win piles today. I could just feel it. I mean, you can't control everything. If I happen to get a little bad beat in there or whatever, it's okay, but I could feel it. I'm going to put that energy out there. I feel really confident today. Today's session will be great. Outside of all of that, there's not much more to bore you guys with. I hope you guys have a lovely day. Let's enjoy today's episode together from none other than the Lucky Lady Casino.
Bear in mind that for the beginning portion of the session, we're actually going to be super short-handed. A couple of no-call, no-shows. If this would be a job, they'd be fired, but hey, things are a little more lenient, I suppose. Front of the gun makes it 30, the button calls. We're playing four-handed at this point, and I like down at jack 8 off. Seems like a fine spot to defend. 3-betting might be a little punty, so we're going off to a flop here 3 ways. That is great, as it comes 8, 6, deuce with 2 spades. When the action checks over to the button, he's an aggressive player that we know all too well. And when he bets out for a larger sizing of $60, I think we have a pretty easy spot to call. Although I think raising has some merit, as there's again a bunch of equity to be had out there. We can target a bunch of those combo draws or a bunch of flush draws, straight draws, you name it. There's a high likelihood that one of my opponents may have some of it. Off to a turn card that's a little bit weird at first sight, as it comes a king of clubs. It shouldn't really change a whole lot to my opponent's specific holding. Outside of hands like king X of spades, it just really doesn't change a whole lot at this exact moment. He bets 150. Once again, I think we have a pretty clear-cut call. We're going off to a river, and once again, there's another overcard, so things are not getting any easy for us as it comes a queen of diamonds. Once again, the main 2 draws that I was expecting my opponent to have here being the 9-7, the 9-10, and all spade draws break out. But it's tougher to be in this specific situation than just ranging an opponent. When I check it over to my opponent, he bets 250. My initial gut reaction is just to snap call, as I think my hand's pretty decent here, and I don't block at all any of the bluffs that I want my opponent to contain. I don't have any spades in my hand, which is great. I don't have a 9 or a 10 in my hand, which is great. If we had a hand like 8-9X or 8-10X or 7-8X, those hands just, without sounding too nerdy, because I barely have a grasp of this myself, it's just not good to hold cards that will interact with my opponent's bluffing range on this river. So when that's the case, although it sucks, at this juncture, our hand went from super strong with a really solid kicker to third pair on a really crummy board. Either way, this is an opponent that's capable of bluffing. I have a lot of respect for. So when you get put in a tough spot, sometimes you just got to close your eyes and say, call, Jesus, take the wheel. I go ahead and make the call here, and our opponent's snap shows 10-9 of hearts. So luckily for us, we are going to win this one. It won't be like this every time, but hey, we'll take it. These hands are going to be coming at you like rapid fire, considering we're going to be playing short-handed for most of the session, 4-handed, 3-handed at some points. Well, this hand is no different. As I look down at ace-queen offsuit from the cutoff, I raise it $30, and then the button decides to 3-bet to 100. When the action gets over the small blind, front of the vlog, and somebody that's very capable of throwing in some chips behind or with some crazy hands, decides to 4-bet jam to 715. Kind of an interesting spot. I think calling here would be disastrous. I don't want to get pushed off my equity. I think that this is pretty much just a fold or a jam sometimes. And after a bit of thinking it over, pondering my thoughts, I decide, you know what the hell? Let's go for it all. Let's go for gusto. Let's go be the hero we've always wanted to be. I go all in for $1,500 effective. Once again, looking to isolate that opponent who jammed for the small blind, is once again, he can be doing this with any 2 cards. The button now goes deep into the tank, pondering over his decisions until eventually he persuades himself to make the fold, and folding pocket jacks face up. As you guys know, getting someone to fold any equity, and a lot of it in a hand, is unbelievably amazing. Either way, we're going out after our opponent asks to run the board out twice. I say yes, And the first board comes out 9-5-5, and I get the bad news immediately when my opponent flips over king 5 of diamonds. Looks like we're going to have to catch up or win the second pot to break even, as the first board completes itself with a 4 and then a 3. The second board comes significantly better as it comes queen 10-6, turn queen giving us top trips, and the river card comes a king of hearts. Looks like we needed that second queen after all. Nonetheless, don't know if my play was perfect in this hand, but I appreciate my thinking in real time, and I like that I was able to get my opponent to fold a better hand. It's pretty nice to see that we were able to pick up a pretty hefty amount of money in the middle, or at least take a shot at the money in the middle against king high. In this next hand, the button decides to limp, and I look down at the small blind with 9-7 of spades. Seems like a good enough hand to isolate sometimes, although probably calling is fairly okay as well. I go ahead and isolate to 80. Both the big blind and the button call. We're going 3 ways off to a flop that comes ace, jack, 6 with 2 spades and a heart, with a really, really great opportunity to throw out a c-bet with some equity. Although I don't have an ace or a jack here, I do have range advantage, I do have good board coverage, and I do have a flush draw. I throw out a small c-bet of 60. At this point, the big blind decides to throw out a raise for 200. The button folds, and I'm kind of in a precarious spot. I just wouldn't overplay aces or jacks in this specific spot. So with those hands, I'd probably just call and look to check raise on different streets. So that's what I go ahead and do with my flush draw. We're going off to a turn card that is one of the best cards in the deck as it comes the 8 of diamonds. Outside of improving my hand immediately, I now pick up some more equity. Any 10 gives me a straight, any 5 gives me a straight, any spade gives me a flush. And at this point, I think I'm set on, dead on, check raising all in. With both of us playing somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000-ish behind, if my opponent bets something in the neighborhood of $300 to $400, something like that, if I go all in, I still have a little bit of fold equity. That plus the simple fact that I just have a ton of equity. So after I check it over to my opponent, getting ready to get my little soldiers into place to punt them off into paradise, I don't get the chance. My opponent checks it through. A little worrisome, as now it feels like my opponent is either giving up on a bluff, which is not that likely, as this is probably a turn card they can continue to barrel on. That plus, it's just likely that my opponent is probably checking back some form of showdown value. When the river card is an unbelievable brick of all bricks as it comes to 3 of diamonds, I check it over to my opponents. I could bet it over to my opponent, but like I said, this is just a spot where I feel like in real time, I have a read that my opponent has a little bit of showdown value. I don't think I can get any ace to ever fold, although granted, I just don't think many aces raises flop. It feels like a lot of 2-pair, like jack 6 suited or ace jack or ace 6 suited, maybe something like that. Ace jack is probably betting the turn, maybe ace jack or ace 6, I should say, not so much. But once again, I just don't think I have any street cred. No one believes me when I bluff. So although I don't love it, I end up deciding to give up. And again, this hand, it sucks. I only have 9 high, but a lot of the hands that I want to be targeting to bluff or to get to fold sometimes, I just block a lot of my opponent's big bluffs. I block the flush draw. I block the straight draws. It just feels like, for the most part, I have no coordination to this board, and it'd be a kind of a crummy bluff. Let me know in the comment section down below whether you think I should be bluffing here or not. If I should just check give up. I'm interested to hear y'all's opinion. But again, in real time, I check it through, and my opponent checks it back. And he says that I'm good. At this point, a little bit of joking ensues where I say I should chop the pot or take it all. He ends up showing king high, and unfortunately for us, king high is good. I'm kicking myself in the ass as I wish I went for it here, but c'est la vie. Okay, although we misplayed that last hand, let me tell you what it's pretty hard to misplay. Pocket aces. Yep, it's one of the hands that you can almost always feel happy to play with, as it's nearly impossible to screw it up. The cutoff makes it 35, and we can go ahead and 3-bet this when the action's on me on the button. I make it $100 to go. Folds back to the cutoff, who decides to call, and the flop comes 10-7-3 with 2 diamonds. I do have the ace of diamonds here, so I think sometimes we can bet or check. It's totally up to me. Seems like all the options here that are available to us are decent. I don't get to do any of them, as my opponent decides to throw out the old lead here for $100. Queen, ace, jack. It feels like just calling here makes the most sense, so I go and do just that. The turn card might seem like a worry card initially as it comes a king of diamonds, bringing in that front door flush. But with my opponent checking it over to me, we're in a spot where I think it's pretty easy for us to range out all of our opponent's flushes. Granted, if he check raises, maybe we can reintroduce that when we cross that bridge. But in reality, I just don't see a ton of my opponent having flushes here that lead out the flop, really. Raising a hand that contains an ace or a king of diamonds seems pretty important, and both of those are accounted for, as well as the 10 of diamonds. So that leaves the queen and the jack of diamonds. So yeah, maybe queen jack of diamonds is something my opponent can have, but outside of specifically that, I don't see too much else. Maybe jack 9 of diamonds or queen 8 of diamonds. Like I said, not a whole lot of flushes, and even less so when they don't bet the turn. And with the action on me, I could think I can comfortably bet here for value, looking to extract some from a hand like king jack, queen jack, and ace 10. I bet 250 and my opponent pretty quickly just calls. When he just calls, like I said, I feel almost 100% confident I have the best hand. And when the river card comes in 8 of spades, although once again it brings in some straight draws, don't see many gutter balls that are going to be calling when there are 3 to a flush out there. So once again, when my opponent checks it over to me, I'm in between deciding to bet or check back. And I think that although it could seem a little scary, I should say, at first glance, I think this is a mandatory spot to at least go for some form of value. We can bet here and pretty much fold to most raises comfortably here, as I just don't think this opponent, or really any opponents, are going to be bluff raising these spots all that often enough with bluffs. So after some thinking, my opponent checks it to me. I bet 300. And he decides to eventually make the call. We show our hand, and it is in fact good. Happy for us there, as we were able to find and extract the max value.
Super good.
Woo! In this next... Wait a second. Before we get into the next hand, I have a really big favor to ask y'all. If you guys wouldn't mind, it would mean the world to me if you guys would click the like button down below and let me know that you guys enjoy seeing this type of content. It takes quite a bit of effort to get this, quite a bit of man hours between me, work, having to play poker, and other things and obligations that I have, as well as Mike, our lovely editor, who does a whole lot of work too. You know, there's a lot that goes into these. So a little bit of support by liking, commenting, and subscribing would go a massive way in helping our community grow. We have a big goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers at the end of this year. And we might be slightly off track, to be totally fair, but never fear. With, you know, time and consistency and quality of work, I see a whole lot of positive in our future. Outside of that, congratulations to the WSOP winners. They'll be being selected on and mentioned on the next episode. Outside of that, you guys know where to find me on the Splash Squads. Also, every single Sunday, we play 2-5 at the Lucky Lady. If you're interested in playing at 1 p.m., swing by. It's a public game. The action is pretty bonkers. Outside of that, I've got some more hands to record here, so let's get back in the booth and do what I do best. Talk too much. Looking to play my heater, capitalize on momentum. In this next hand, the action folds to me in the small blind. I look down at king, queen off. I raise to 35, and the big blind decides to come along with a 3-bet to 135. For $100 more, not a great spot, as this is a massive 3-bet, but we do have a really solid hand. We're playing 3-handed, so I'm here to get in the mix. The flop comes out king 10 deuce with 2 diamonds. We do flop ourselves top pair, as well as a backdoor flush draw to boot. I check call the c-bet of $80, and we're going off to a turn card that comes the 6 of clubs. Once again, doesn't change a whole lot here. If I had the best hand on the flop, it's probably damn sure as hell going to be the best hand after this turn card comes out. A check. Once again, my opponent bets for 200, and I have an easy call as well. We're going off to a river card that's not my favorite card in the world, as it comes the 10 of spades. So for some reason, my opponent had a hand like ace 10. He's now going from, I don't know if that's even bluffing or betting for semi-value, to now having trips. So when I check it over to him and he bets all in for 705, it's kind of a tough spot. The weird thing is now is that I can still beat some value being a hand like king jack or king 9 suited, as it's not ridiculous to go for value with a hand like that and target an inferior king that I could obviously have, or some bluffs like queen jack, ace queen, queen 9, jack 9. All those hands I think are really clear-cut bluffs here by the river. Although I don't know if my opponent is capable of doing that. I think that is still yet to be, found out. But once again, my hand's just way too strong to ever fold. So I go ahead and make the call, expecting to be good a decent portion of the time. And this is one of the times where we're not, as our opponent shows ace king. Honestly, three-handed, kind of a cooler. Unfortunate for us to not win this, but once again, a cooler is just a cooler. I don't think that I can ever credibly fold that. Once we flop top pair and second best kicker, you just kind of got to go with it. The session continues to press forward, and this next hand, the button makes it $30 to go. I'm in the big blind, and I look down at ace 3 off, good enough to defend. We're going to have to a flop where we flop two pair on 7-7-3. Not the two pair you were thinking of initially, rainbow board, kind of a dry board texture. At this point, I check it over to my opponent, who decides to start a little min click for 10 bucks. Hard to fold here. I make the call, and the turn card comes out the deuce of spades. At this point, once again, I check it over to my opponent, who once again throws out a really tiny bet of 20. At this exact juncture, maybe my opponent's playing games with me. It's hard to tell. Maybe it's taking me to Value Town. But one thing's for sure, my hand's probably too good to fold, so I call once again. The river card is probably the best card in the deck. Did not expect this, as it comes the ace of diamonds. I decided to throw out a little blocker bet for 10 bucks, just in case my opponent happens to have a 7 or a better ace. Seems like a good spot to set our own price and get away pretty cheaply if our opponent throws in a massive raise. And a massive raise is what our opponent does, as he decides to snap raise to $275. Against this sizing, it's just hard to find anyone ever bluffing here, so maybe our opponent played his hand here a little face up. Maybe he didn't. The point being, I can't freaking call this. I go ahead and make a snap fold here. Even though we have three pair, we block boats, obviously, and we, again, jokes aside, we have two pair, we have top pair. Just, I can't think of any bluffs, and if my opponent has one, you just tip your cap off, you say good hands, you shake their hand, you pass them the chips, and hope them the best. Okay, so things might not have gone perfectly in the last few hands, but after making a big fold, we're looking to continue on the right direction. After the button makes it $30 to go, the action folds to me here in the big blind, and I look down at king 3 of spades. Once again, we're still playing 3 or 4 hand at this point. I think this is a decent hand to go ahead and 3-bet bluff with. These suited kings work really well with removal, so I make it 125. He ends up deciding to 4-bet to 275. Kind of an annoying situation here where my hand's just obviously awful, but with the price being so good and considering we're deep enough probably to get away with some punty behavior as such, what the hell, let's give some action. What do we come here for, to fold? Nah, you can't make a vlog that way, so I go ahead and make the call here for $150 more to go, and the flop comes out jack 7-4 with 2 spades. Well, we've somehow flopped ourselves quite a bit of equity. When I decide to check, my opponent c-bets for 150. I decide to raise to 500. With the action back to my opponent, he decides to go all in for about $1,800, and with the action back over to me, it seems like we're obviously up against an overpair, so I have to do some quick math. If my opponent has a hand like pocket queens, I do have 1 over, which is good for 3 outs, as well as 9 outs to spades that we can assume are clean, which gives us about 20, or 12 outs, I should say. 20 would be amazing. But we have about 12 outs, give or take, and with 2 cards to come, it feels like we're getting about a good enough price to go ahead and gamble it up here. Although I don't love it, king high, getting this much money in the middle is probably just not the best. It's a little bit less ridiculous when we're getting a reasonable enough price to make the call here. Seems like the pot odds are there. If my opponent has aces, we only have 9 cleats out. But if my opponent has queens or ace jack, we have, like I said, 12. So I decide to make the call here. And our opponent asks to run it out twice, which we happily oblige to do so. On the first board, the turn card comes a jack of clubs, and the river comes a 5 of clubs. 2 black cards, but unfortunately, none of the American Express variety. The second board comes out with immediate satisfaction, as this time around, American Express black card has accepted our application, as it comes the 6 of spades, just a black card we were looking for. The river card comes the 8 of diamonds, doesn't change too much to this board here. I show my hand, and we are chopping against pocket aces. Looks like in this spot we ended up getting a little lucky, but the one thing you can do is never count this cat out. as I have more than 9 lives at this point. After near disaster in that last hand, we've got another fun one to go over. The button makes it $30 to go, the small blind calls, and I'm in the big blind, and we look down at pocket Kieran's, everyone's favorite hand, pocket kings. We decided to 3-bet it up to 120. With the action over to the button, he makes it $300 to go. With the action back over to me, pocket Kieran's, an up and down session, looking to capitalize on my image of crazy wackiness. I go ahead and 5-bet to $800. Sure, I don't have a massively balanced 5-bet range maybe all the time, but to be fair, if anyone does, probably me. I can find weird spots to 5-bet, and luckily for us, we've got value in this one. My opponent goes deep into the tank literally forever before we start talking and negotiating and having some fun going back and forth. Eventually, we come up with a reasonable decision where I tell my opponent, okay, we don't have to get it all in, but if you put 1K, we can run out the board twice and see where this comes out. My opponent shows me ace-king of spades, so after tanking for several minutes, he really thought about folding that. And to his credit, I agree with his initial impression that most people aren't balanced when they're 5-betting, but little does he know that Kieran can bunt. We've seen it before. All that to be said, luckily for us, our opponent does decide to make the call for 1K total, and we decide to run out a board with no more action, 2 of them to be a sack. The first board comes out with an absolute sweat of a flop as it comes 7-deuce-3 with 2 spades. My opponent flops the nut flush draw. We now have a massive sweat going on for full speed until the turn card comes a king of hearts. We remove a few outs here, looking to fade it all on the river, and the river comes the queen of hearts. Well, if somehow we did not 3-bet or 5-bet this flop, I should say, if we saw that flop and let alone that turn, all of this money, $4,000 or $5,000 would have been in the middle quickly. Outside of that, look, we're playing for 2K. I've got half this pot locked up. We're going off to a second flop and run out. The second board comes out significantly less sweaty as it comes 9-8 deuce. Turns a 5 and the river's a deuce pairing the bottom card here. Just like that, we end up getting a massive 2K pot shipped our way. Definitely needed it here as things were looking a little bit shaky, but luckily for us, pocket Kieran's came to the rescue. Just a couple more hands to go over, and there's some really fun ones, so let's get ready. In this next hand, I'm on the button, I make it $30 to go. The video is going to be starting here from the flop, so we've still got some more action pre-flop to go over when the small blind 3-bets to 120. With pocket 8s here, a dream position, seems like a pretty easy spot to just make the call. Albeit we're 4 and 5-handed, maybe sometimes this is a decent 4-bet, but honestly, I'm way in over my head at this point. Feels like calling is the best thing to do, or the thing I feel most comfortable with doing, and sometimes just good enough. I go ahead and make the call, and the flop comes out probably the best I can ask for 8s as it comes 6-4-4. Flopping an overpair on a flop like this with a middling pair feels great. When my opponent down bets to 75, I think raising here has some merit as my opponent is going to be able or less likely to continue to c-bet with his ace highs when I do this. And I can still get value from those hands as more than likely a hand like ace king, ace queen, ace jack with backdoor straight or flush draws obviously will probably call. All that to be said, my opponent doesn't have to be put to the test as I just make the call. And the turn card comes out to 4 of clubs. At this point, we have a full rainbow out there when the opponent checks it over to me. I just don't think I can ever get value from a hand that's worse. Any ace high or king high is never going to call a bet here, so I'd rather allow my opponent, albeit giving up a free card is scary. I'd rather my opponent bluff at the river with whatever this comes out here, as I can pretty comfortably say that if I check back this turn, I'm happy to call almost all rivers. The river card comes out the 7 of hearts. Here's one of the rivers that I said I'd be calling. Unfortunately, won't come to that as my opponent checks it over to me. Hard to see what I can possibly get value from, but I still think there has to be a spot like this where I can bet for value. Fortunately for us, our opponent decides to snap fold and live to fight another day. To be quite honest, today's been one of the more swingy sessions we've had in a while. Feels like the crypto market in recent history, but here we are battling away in the last hand of the session. I find myself on the button with ace king off. I go ahead and raise it up to $50. 2 chips, just probably easier to grab than 4. The straddler calls here, and we're going off to a flop that comes king 8-4 rainbow. Oh, look at that beautiful side, big slick coming through big when we need it most. Hopefully we can now build up a pot and get us a solid win to close out the day. At this point, I decided down bet to 40. This is such a dry board texture. No straight draws really to really be worried about. He actually does call. We're going off to a turn card here that comes the 8 of diamonds. Not great at initial sight here, but when my opponent checks it over to me, I think we can kind of discount our opponent from having an 8. I think most 8s like 8-9, 8-7, 8-6, 10-8 will be probably leading out this turn, as well as ace-8. So my opponent checks it over to me, and I decide to bet for value once again for 110, and my opponent calls. I think at this point we can pretty comfortably put my opponent on a hand like king-queen, king-jack, king-10, king-9. All of those holdings make a ton of sense, pretty much all the kings here. And when the river card comes a brick of all bricks, deuce of hearts, and my opponent checks it over to me, I think I'm in a weird spot where I'm considering on the sizing I want to go with. With somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 in the middle, I think going over bet is kind of reasonable, but in reality, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, at least not for my specific range. I mean, like, what kind of bluffs am I going to be getting with on this river? Just not a whole lot. So when that's the case, I just don't think I need to be going polar. I'm not breaking out some massive combo draw where there was a super wet board texture. It's super dry. If I'm going to be bluffing on this river, I mean, I really can't even think of one to be quite fair. Maybe a hand like ace-5 of diamonds or ace-3 of diamonds kind of makes sense. But outside of that, it's just not a whole lot more. So with all that being said, I've got to balance that out by being able to value bet thin and thinner and thinner. Luckily, we're at the top of our value betting range probably. So I just bet 2/3. I mean, what the hell? Why not? Seems like it's not that bad of an idea. And our opponent does not like it. You can see it visibly. He's not happy about it. But he inevitably decides to make the call. Let's go. Finally, we got him. We show our hand, and it is very much good. Just like that, a session that's been a little swingy up and down has ended with the perfect cherry on top. Today's session, outside of the King 3 debacle, I think was a good job of showing the mental fortitude and the ability to make some folds. Making a big folder with triple pair was exciting. Obviously, some other spots we were able to pick up thin value here with pairs and stuff was great as well. So all that to be said, always room for improvement. I don't think I played the best game of poker in my life, but I feel confident saying we didn't play the worst. Either way, it was a blast making today's session, but I've got to talk to y'all more in person, as we've just got a very important phone call, kind of a dire emergency, so I've got to go take care of that. So let me throw it over to you in person so you can hear what the hell's going on.
I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. It's too easy. I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. Too easy.
So, kind of an interesting session and a little anticlimactic. Unfortunately, this is either going to be a mid-session update or the end of the vlog. So, you guys will know before even I do you guys will know in a couple seconds, and I'll know. Game's obviously really good and a lot of fun, but I got a work call, and obviously work carries over the precedent. So we're gonna run to work, as that's really important. We're into the game for 2,000, and I'm currently at about a $3,000 stack. I have chips, so my intent is to come back, but I've got to make money to support the family. So either way, either this is the end of the vlog, super anticlimactic, and we'll probably do a proper outro in a second, but let's cross that bridge when we get there.
5 hours later.
Let's take a wild guess and say that because you folks can see that I am not at the casino, and this video's obviously, you can see the timeline here. You guys are some smart peeps. The video is going to be ending soon. So you can tell that we ended up not playing. So obviously work takes the priority over anything in my, pretty much anything that I'm going to do in life. Just work, right? We're all slaves to the sim. We were into the session for a whopping 2,000. It was actually not a big game. We didn't really have the $40 or the $20 straddle even on at all, which is kind of foreign for what we usually do. But we ended up, like I said, getting the game for 2,000, and after a little bit of some good fortune and some just getting premiums, we ended up out of the game for 3,000 exactly. So could have been better. if we chose not to do some things in other spots, but just felt like an ABC kind of day, honestly. Just felt like me getting aces and kings and getting value in spots where, traditionally speaking, a lot of value to be had, I guess. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the poker content as per usual. You can expect this to continue to be coming. Yeah, I'm excited for the WSOP. The winners will be announced in the next video. Keep a lookout out for y'all if you haven't had the opportunity to win. It's a pleasure as always to have you folks. If you guys ever want to play with me, you guys can always play with me on the Splash Squads. You guys can always play with me in person in this private game, as I mentioned at the foot of this video. Private game, we've always got a seat for some peeps. So if you guys are ever interested, although the game's usually pretty jam-packed, we're always happy to try out some new individuals from Instagram DMs or whatever the case may be. So you guys know where to find me Sundays 1 p.m. at the Lucky Lady. If you guys can't see me there, no worries. I can see you at the private game or the online felt or the WSOP or just somewhere. Have a wonderful day, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Stay happy, healthy, and more importantly, y'all, we're good at the tables. Deuces.
I can do this with my eyes closed.